Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Well, today, for those of you who read A Better World newsletter, know that we are going to be holding a prophecy roundtable, in particular an Indigenous Prophecy Roundtable. We'll be addressing some subjects that are age-old, of course, historical in nature, and you could even say aeonic in nature. What is going to be the fuller manifestation and destiny of our human species? This has been a subject that has long been puzzling human beings really since our beginning. And we have done everything we can, look inward, look outward, go to the stars and everywhere else to get some handle on what this destiny might look like. Well, it happens to be particularly interesting that there have been some very ancient peoples who have managed to fathom some greater sense of the cycles of time, perhaps better than others. And one of those stellar groups, no pun intended, is the Mayans. And for thousands of years, the Mayans had a series of calendars, and they had some for agricultural farming purposes, some for daily activities, and some for understanding the larger cycles in time, such as what's referred to as the long count. This particular counting is related to the recognition of sacred events, sacred activities that are celestial in nature, that are cosmic in nature. And that will very much be the subject of today's show, because we have with us the well-known, well-published Dr. Calleman, who began his life, professional career, I should say, as a biologist, as a toxicologist at University of Stockholm, and then for the World Health Organization, when I think he got a little tired of looking in petri dishes and decided to go to Mexico, and started looking into the Mayan culture. And that was way back in 1979, and slowly and surely, Carl, because of his scientific mind, good wit, and vast intuition, came to an understanding of the nature of the Mayan calendar, possibly surpassing most of his colleagues, and even to some extent, even though this may sound rather blasphemous, even some of the elders themselves who have turned to him for some guidance about how the calendar is actually operating, and even to fathom some of its meaning. Now, if I'm wrong about this, I don't doubt that Dr. Calleman will be correcting me shortly when we bring him in on the line from Sweden. But from there, we're going to understand that the dating of the Mayan calendar, unlike Hollywood and unlike really most scholars worldwide, is not, according to Carl Calleman, December 21st, 2012, but rather, okay folks, get ready, this week, Friday, October 28th, 2011. And Dr. Calleman was kind enough to be on the air with us today, the very same week of the ending, the completion of the Mayan calendar, and we'll explore with him what that means. Additionally, for the roundtable, to round it out, as it were, we have with us a Hopi who just returned from Paris, where he was part of a large gathering of people speaking about indigenous wisdom and the importance of love and of human transformation at this point in time, of the upgrade, you could say, an evolution of consciousness, is Ruben Saufkie, who is here really from the second mesa in Arizona. And with him is his friend and colleague, and it looks like now sister, Elyse Monet, who has been a performer in her life and is a healer and is quite well known out in the LA world. And just for the last 6 months, she has seen a major transformation and gaining of knowledge in her own life about the Hopi ways. And so both of them are joining us in studio to pick up on the second half of today's show to talk about another perspective on the whole idea of consciousness, its evolution, and the notions of prophecy that have been with Indigenous peoples, this deep-seated sense of future based on current, in the present activities. And this is sort of what we really need to take a look through that window together and ask some questions and get some answers. So for those of you who know this show, you know that we explore in depth a lot of different things having to do with waking up, awareness, education, upliftment of the spirit, and inspiration once we know who we are and the kind of empowerment we really deserve and can have to make the world a better place. Please visit us at our website, by the way, and get on the newsletter so you know what will be next. And that's prophetic, yes, indeed, at www.abetterworld.net and become part of the larger A Better World family. So with that said, Carl, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Hi,
excellent. Mitch. Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
Good.
I'm in Sweden right now, and a little bit in the north, you might say.
Yes. Are you in your wonderful little hut in the woods?
Well, no, I'm staying with friends here who has a more convenient
Not so rustic, eh? Yeah. Well, thank you for staying up so late, Carl, to engage us here in New York City in the Big Apple with some of your knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah.
So really appreciate it. Yeah. So, listen, you have been gaining in popularity. It's been a wonderful thing over the past number of years since we met back in January of 2004 in Chennai, India, at Oneness University, actually, Golden City, where you were the advisor to the chief guru there, Sri Bhagavan, in helping him understand the nature and the character of the Mayan calendar. And now, over this time, it's been wonderful to see how more and more people have been tuning into your way of understanding the Mayan calendar. In fact, why don't we open by letting people know that just this past March, the Mayan elders gathered and honored you with a staff to acknowledge your good work, your very high-level work in understanding the Mayan calendar, so people can see that you are not some kind of, Anglo renegade who's just taken their calendar and just done what you've done with it and made all sorts of radical statements at the expense of a tradition, but rather from the inside you are recognized and acknowledged as someone who is truly articulating the understandings that are at the base of the texts. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience was like and what you went through with that ceremony? Well,
it was, we were on a cruise called Cruising into 2012, and Surfing the Ninth Wave, I think, was
I like
called.
That, Surfing the...
That's a good name for it.
Yeah, totally.
And then as part of that, we made a landing in Puerto Vallarta, and it was a group of elders had been, some of them were Mayans, many of them were Aztecs, and some of them, I believe, were Olmecs. And they've been traveling a very long time, and I think 17 hours, because they had to go through all of these roadblocks that the Mexican police today have to make in order to block the narco trade and stuff like that, and so they've taken a lot of pain, and then they would be preparing, they would be chanting at the water for several hours before this event, and then the whole group that came from the boat were invited, and then they gave certain members, including myself, staffs, and I'm not sure if I would call this like an official recognition in any sense, but it was still, I was still very moved by it, simply because the people that gave it to me, they actually knew. They had read my books and were aware of it, and they wanted to express their thanks to me for having spread the Mayan knowledge in the world to the extent that I have. And so it was a very great and moving ceremony.
Who were the elders who were present?
Well, it was an elder was called Don Juan Moreno, who was the sort of the leader. But I don't look upon it as an endorsement by, for instance, the Council of Elders of the Maya in Guatemala. Mm-hmm. It were more like just individuals, as far as I can tell, so it's yeah. That's.
But is it not so, Carl, please correct me if I don't remember correctly, that there was another occasion some years back where there had been another acknowledgement of you and your work relative to your understanding of the Mayan calendar and its dating?
No, I'm not sure about that. I'm not.
Was
sure
I there alone?
What's that?
Was I there alone? I'm kidding you.
You might have been there alone, yes. In general, I would say that the most of the Mayan elders, they will say that they lost the long count 1,000 years ago, and so they do not want to specify anything about the end date today, and which is really true. And,
that's a very honest comment.
Yeah, and I think they've been more clear about that. Sometimes you hear maybe an elder saying December 21, 2012, but really what that means is just that it's something they've heard from the archaeologists. The interest in the Mayan calendar has come from the outside, I would say, and then people have gone down there to find out about this, and they have learned certain basic ways of looking at the calendar, and then gone back to sort of formulate ideas that are more accessible in the modern world than in the more sort of more magical settings that the Mayan elders are operating themselves.
Okay, well, you enter the scene from your scholarly and scientific perspective, and you've reviewed the texts as best you can without becoming fluent in Mayan, and you have come to some really interesting points about what it's really about, having to do with the transformation of human consciousness. It's certainly not about the end of the world, and you could say it's the end of the world as we know it, or rather as we have until now perceived it. So there is an explosion in my understanding of your perspective of our consciousness relative to what is possible and who we are in this life, on this planet, in this universe. And that's very, pardon my expression, explosive kind of information. It's a departure from the assumptions that have been made over time. And it's, of course, kind of topped off, if you will, with this idea that it comes to completion not a year from now, plus a month or two, but actually now. How did you come to that, and what does it mean?
Well, I think to begin with, when you listen to, I'll have to have a little bit of a debate here with the December 21, 2012 date, because, you hear people saying this date, but the people that say this date have no agreement of what it means. It's a date that you can fill in any kind of fantasies, which is a very different approach from what I'm taking.
Yes.
My approach has been to study the different frames of consciousness, or the different frames of the human mind that have been associated with the different levels of evolution according to the Mayan calendar. And from this, I deduced that the end of the calendar, it would mean that the the dualist mind would eventually come to be transcended by a unitary frame of mind. Now, this is a fairly specific statement, and it's about our, you might say, an internal state. But nonetheless, in the worldview that I've come to embrace, what happens in the external world is really just a projection of the changes that we undergo in our internal world, according to the cosmic changes that the Mayan calendar stipulates. So, in this sense, I have a specific definition and of what the end date means. I'm not just choosing a date where people can fill in whatever they like. No, it has a specific meaning.
Yes.
And based on this, you might also see that a number of people, an increasing number of people, have been following the evolution of the cosmos for the past couple of years in that direction that is now being completed on October 28th, between Friday and Saturday this week. And it is. You might also say that from this definition, the whole sort of discussion whether it's the end of the world or not the end of the world becomes very, very silly, and because that's not what any Maya have ever said, or it's really not part of the scenario that the calendar lays out. It is much more about a specific change in how human beings perceive the world, a shift from duality to unity.
Yes.
And that's something we can more or less measure, maybe not on an exact date, but more or less that we're on firm ground. We can discuss it together because we're not just speculating.
Well, this is profound because we as humans have been both caught, manipulated by, and subject to the whims and fancies, if you will, of a polarized mind. Right hemisphere, left hemisphere, yin and yang, not knowing what side is up, unfortunately, and creating a huge amount of disaster on one level and another on our planet for literally thousands, tens upon thousands of years. And civilizations have risen and they have fallen. And if you want to reach back all the way to Lemuria and Atlantis, and some speculate that there were civilizations prior to those, human beings caught by the polar mind have been shifting in so many ways, but what they are always lacking is the goal of all spiritual traditions, as you and I both know, of unity consciousness, of seeing and being inside of the unified field of the two polarities and watching them as a play of consciousness rather than taking this whole thing so seriously. So what you are purporting about the meaning of the end date of the calendar, meaning that there will be a shift toward unity consciousness, is probably the biggest step that we could take as a humanity. One of the problems, perhaps the problem, is that people don't perceive each other as their brothers and sisters. We don't perceive each other as family. We don't perceive ourselves as Gaia as much as just human. And because of this, we're able to perpetuate harm on one another, rather blindly and unconsciously. If we're living in the state of a unified field, of unified consciousness, we can't hurt others or ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that a fair assessment of what you're suggesting?
Well, it's a fair assessment of what I'm suggesting. If I look at the situation now,
please expound more. Enlighten me. I want to know.
Okay. Well, let me say, it looks like a quite realistic scenario that when we come to October 28th, there will be some kind of like the opening, some kind of a dam starting to burst, you might say. And the form that it takes might, for instance, be the collapse of the euro. And then, it would be, it would spread from there in both the east and the west direction. We see this strong intensification at this moment of the Occupy Everywhere movement.
Yes.
And it's all about the same thing. The fights, if you like, that people are fighting in Syria or in Yemen or in Libya or in the United States or in Greece or in Germany, they're the same. The expression of the same desire for a shift, where there is no longer dominance. There's no longer, and dominance is usually linked to duality. And so all of these things are coming out of this shift to unity consciousness that has been brought by this particular ninth wave. Now, I think personally that humanity have been, there are certain, we're sort of stuck in our relationships. The world is like a network of relationships. And this network of relationships is very much more, when we start to talk about relationships and how we are in relationships to others, we have had a tendency to sort of look much more on our personal, emotional relationships.
Yes.
But in the big scale of things, the relationships are very much determined by the economic reality. Simply put, the people that have a bank account that has a high number are basically deciding what the others with a low number in the bank account are supposed to do with their lives. I mean, literally speaking, they decide what all the others are doing, spending all their waking hours.
Right.
And this means that we've all been sort of stuck in this kind of what should I say?
Very limited definition.
What's that?
A very limited definition of self and potential.
Yes. And if this breaks apart, which is, if it doesn't happen this week, it certainly will happen within before the end of this year. I can tell. I'm absolutely certain of that. And then, when those chains are broken, then I think it will be almost like for us to start to reinvent ourselves. I would even like to use the word to become better people. In other words, there will be an opening for us to much more express our natural empathy, empathy with one another, empathy with nature, and all of these things that we have been barred from expressing, and we've been barred from feeling them. And so it's almost like the way I envision it is like now there is some kind of a political, economic collapse going on around the world. And once that happens, of course, there will be the whole discussion of how to reorganize the world in a political, economic sense. But it will also be this opening to feel more empathetic in all our relationships.
Yes.
And that then should be the guiding principle for what to replace the old system with.
Yes, I think so. And, since this is called the Indigenous Roundtable, Prophecy Roundtable, we are reminded that those people who have lived closest to the heartbeat of the earth and the pulse of life have been standing as a symbol of that more feeling-based, empathetic relationship to all of us for all these years. It's always been there. It's just many have not really ingested that symbol and what they stand for. And even within our own culture, the artists, by and large, as an archetype within modern Western, European, American society, have always been those expressing a greater sense, you could say, of authenticity, who have stood outside of the paradigm. People in art, in theater, in dance, in music, their value system has never been, by and large, the same as the ordinary society. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that this will represent a significant breakthrough for us when we all can feel that empathy as a collective and as a kind of a default position of what it is to be human, because truly we've migrated from the heart to the mind, and we've gotten rather lost and puzzled there, unfortunately. Yep. How does this timing of October 28th, Carl, relate to the notion of a changing magnetic field, magnetic poles on the planet? Is there a relationship?
I don't think so. What my work is about is to describe how different polarities of consciousness is associated with specific time periods in the Mayan calendar. As far as I can tell, these polarities are not related primarily to electromagnetic changes. In fact, I tend to think that they pervade the universe, that they spread synchronistically. Changes take place at the same time all over the universe, which would be impossible to. It couldn't happen if it would require that the changes would be traveling with the speed of light. So it's something else. These shifts are more like polarity shifts that you may talk about or spin shifts that you may talk about in quantum theory. Mm-hmm. That they happen because different particles or different objects they're entangled, they're connected, but they don't really. I don't think it has anything to do with electromagnetics or that kind of physics that you sometimes hear about.
Okay. Well, how about solar flares then, or any solar activity? Some interpret that the Mayan calendar is actually some kind of historic record and prediction of solar activity.
Well, the sun is part of the whole system, I would say. The way I look upon it, it is the cosmos in its entirety that gives the sort of the highest level of changes in the polarities that the Mayan calendar describes. And then it's sort of at the same time it happens on the level of the galaxy and on the level of the solar system and on the level of the planet and on the level of the human beings and then down to the cells and the atoms and so forth. Mm-hmm. So the sun, I believe, is part of this. And it may be that solar flares might be at least at this moment, that they somehow may be synchronized with the waves of the Mayan calendar. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there have to be fractal relationships between what's going on there and what's going on inside this micro expression of creation called a human being.
Yes, there must be. There are fractal relationships, but I tend to, despite the fact that in all of these discussions, I'm the guy who actually has a scientific background. I really mean that.
Yes,
and it can be researched, and people can find out how much credibility my work in the past has.
Sure.
And at the same time, I'm the guy who always are saying, don't look at these physical parameters primarily. Mm-hmm. Look at the shifts in consciousness. Look at the shifts in polarities in consciousness and how that is expressed in human history. And then then you're starting to get the Mayan calendar. It's not the regular physics, so to speak, and yet it is waves that are pervading the entire universe and serves like consciousness waves, if you like.
Yes.
But that's something else. It's something we cannot measure today. In fact, you have to involve consciousness in order to become aware of the changes in consciousness that is happening according to the Mayan calendar.
Okay, so much for my poetic flight of fancy. I understand. I understand. I want to let everybody know you are listening to Mitchell J. Rabin on A Better World, speaking with Dr. Carl Calleman, the author of many books, latest of which is The Purposeful Universe: How Quantum Theory and Mayan Cosmology Explain the Origin and Evolution of Life. He's been on the cutting edge of Mayan calendric understanding on the planet and has said something just terrifically potent and charged for all of us, and very exciting actually that there is this opening at the end of the calendar. So while it looks like a completion, it is, but every single completion also gives rise to another opening, a new beginning. And guess what? With all the occupying taking place, we're finally on October 28th, if you don't know it, going to be engaged in something called Occupy Yourself. And if you want some more information on that, just go to our website, www.abetterworld.net, under special feature. Are you aware of that, Carl?
No, I'm not.
Oh, it's
I would look at it.
Fabulous. It's
great.
It's fabulous, right? And it is so funny. I don't think they had any idea that of your timing calling the end of the Mayan calendar that day, but it happens to be called on that day that everyone worldwide is being asked to go into themselves, as it said on that famous T-shirt, inquire within, and go and spend time in meditation, in prayer, in laughter, in joy, in making love, in being with friends.
Wonderful.
And withdraw, but completely as best you can from the system, not even getting onto the internet. Pull out plugs from walls, spend not a shekel, really pull out and do not feed what we have been feeding for so long, and let's watch the energy shift right there. And I think it's so hilarious that that has been called for that day of October 28th.
Yes, wonderful.
So let me introduce our other guests today. We have with us Elyse Monet and Ruben Saufkie, who is here from the second mesa of the Hopi Reservation in northern Arizona. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have both of you on today. And
Thank you, Mitchell.
Sure. And we did a TV show this morning, including Ruben's son and uncle, who his son did the Sacred Eagle dance, which those of you who watch Better World TV will be able to see literally within the next few weeks. So stay tuned. And I'm so glad to have you. And I'd like to just hear, Ruben, if you would first just give us some idea of, as you're listening to Carl and hearing from one of your brothers, a white form of Mayan brother, what goes on inside you as you listen to this and compare it in your mind and heart to the Hopi prophecy?
Lodma, Calleman.
Hello, Ruben. It's so good to hear you.
It's good to hear you and listen to you also. I'm also very grateful that you found it on your path to come into this teaching.
Yes.
And as you remember, as we were headed back to Paris, I was asking you how you got onto this path, and you told me that this was a journey that you took, going into Mexico and finding the spirit within to receive this calling.
Yes.
And I know this is your work and your perspective on the Mayan calendar, and I'm grateful for what I had listened to, being with you personally, and also right now listening to you. And as for us as Hopi, we don't have a very specific date of what we call the transformation, purification into the fifth world. But we know that we are very close because there are the signs that are telling us, which was prophesied. And one I'll share real quickly is our language. Our Lavai, what we call it, our Hopi language, is one that is being very rapidly being forgotten. And, that's something that is happening on Hopi. And we're only a people of a little over 13,000 when the last census was taken. That is a very small number compared to many other native tribes within the native country in U.S. So I feel that this is a very crucial time, that since we are seeing this, one of the last prophecies that is telling us that if we don't wake up and really listen to the prophecies, which are basically a guideline, a tool for us to use so that we can not succumb to these teachings. Unfortunately, many of us, even as Hopi people, are not even listening also. So my part of it is to encourage myself first, my family and my elders, my people, to wake up amidst the chaos that we are also living here on Hopi. And as you know, that I have shared much more personal with you of what has been happening on Hopi.
Yes.
And a lot of it is also due to our own mindset. Many of us are still within our own mind, thinking that we can control, and being so much in our mind, our ego, and totally forgetting our heart, which is the basic principle, the basic philosophy, simply that we were given this title of what Hopi means, a life to live in balance and in harmony. And we have fallen off our path because we thought that we could be much more superior than to Masa, the creator that gave us this covenant and this law.
God, you are speaking really for so many different tribes, including the Hebraic tribes, of which I'm part by birth. And it's really the dissension among the tribes that has led to the diaspora, meaning the Jews being cast out from their homeland of Israel, of Jerusalem. And it's just like the same story. It's archetypal in nature. It repeats itself anywhere and everywhere we look around the planet over time. And it's heartbreaking, and yet we see the work that needs to be done in order to mend and to heal. And I think you put it very nicely, Ruben, that by coming into the place of the heart, we can begin to do that mending. When we take responsibility personally ourselves, some magic happens in the universe where things can shift in a way that all of the external manipulations won't quite accomplish. Elise, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. You are an interesting player here because you basically just came across the Hopi teachings in a way by sitting in meditation cross-legged on probably a Sedona vortex just about 6 months ago. And here you are coming to New York to be part of the Hopi expression at the United Nations this week.
That's correct.
So, welcome.
Thank you, Mitchell. It's been quite an amazing adventure and journey, and I attribute it all to just being open and saying, show me what's next on my path. And I think that's what Ruben's talking about when he's talking about getting out of your mind and going into your heart. And it's about show me the way. It's this attitude of I'm here, show me what's next, and I'm open to all truth. And it's amazing when you start getting out of your own way, the miracles that can happen. And Dr. Calleman, you'll appreciate this. I have a friend, Dr. Howard Martin, who has
I was just about to bring him up. Heart
good.
Math. He's
Yeah.
been on the show.
Yeah, Howard's brilliant.
Yeah.
And Heart Math has done a lot of research, scientific research about the heart.
Yes.
And it's amazing
You're
research.
reading my mind.
Oh, good.
Please
well,
stop.
this is part of my UN presentation. So,
Yes.
yeah, Howard has given put forth some information about measuring the human heart. And when the human heart actually goes into what he calls coherence, it's at 0.10 hertz or 10 hertz. And the Schumann wave, which is the heartbeat of the earth, Gaia herself, resonates between 7.83 hertz and 13 hertz. And right smack dab in the middle is humanity when we're coherent with all that exists at 0.10 hertz. So to me, this speaks volumes that when we get out of our minds and go into our heart space, this is where our connection is to all that exists. And it's scientifically proven.
Exactly. That's one of the beauties of the role science is playing these days. It's sort of giving the modern mind a chance to get a glimpse into the age-old wisdom of the traditions, indigenous and otherwise, and along the same path, Elise, is something else that emerged from research at the Heart Math Institute, which I was actually about to quote. I'm very glad you made that point, is that the heart actually contains 30 to 40,000 neurons. It's actually got brain matter. It is actually an independent brain in the body. It can act autonomously, but it's actual intelligence.
Yes, they call it the intelligent heart theory. And the ironic thing is that the intelligent heart theory is what all the indigenous peoples have known
all along.
all these thousands and thousands of years.
You could say, what's new?
Yeah, it's like, what's new? And the other interesting point is that Heart Math makes is the human heart, when it's is the first organ in the body that is developed. It's the very first organ that's completely developed in the human body. And no one knows yet what causes it to take its first beat. Now, if we are connected to all that exists and we cannot exist without that first beat of our hearts,
Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating to think that there is something much bigger than our minds, our brains, our physical bodies. There's something much bigger that we are connected to and that exists in everything around us.
Carl, I think I may have said this to you some time ago in conversation of a workshop I took with the famed Terence McKenna, who I had on the show back in the mid-'90s. And someone asked him, "Dear Terence, what is God?" And, you could ask that kind of question to Terence McKenna, and he'd always come up with a good answer. He said, "God is biology." And, that is so brilliant. I love him for that,
Yeah.
So here we have this heart, which is in fractal relationship to the Earth herself, which is in fractal relationship to this galaxy, which is in fractal relationship then to the universe at large. And we are but this beautiful heartbeat, Elise, that you were just speaking of, pulsating every single moment, but we're conscious, if we're lucky, of our own heartbeat, let alone all the other outer layers and inner layers of it. Carl, what do you have to say about this interesting pulsing conversation?
The interesting conversation?
I said pulsing conversation.
Pulsing?
Pulsing. Like a heartbeat, like a pulse.
Yeah, well, no, at this point...
I'm playing with you,
Nothing, yes, no, nothing comes to mind, but...
Well, how does it relate? How does this notion of dropping into the heart and being in the heart space relate to the idea of coherence that occurs when the polarities are relaxed and we're entering that unified field that you're speaking of? is connoted through the completion of the calendar. In other words, what's going to be happening to us on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of next week? How is that going to actually show up in our physical bodies and hearts and minds?
Well, it probably just means that for a long time we have been operating like divided people, divided into the mind of the right and the left brain half, and if instead we will be guided by our hearts and the connection of our hearts to God, then that is the kind of change that I envision.
Yes.
And it's it is partly really biological, even though it's also a mental thing. But it is rather than being sort of the operating from two separate brain halves, it's about being operating from the unified heart space.
Beautiful. Yeah. After all, we know from many studies that any thought is not distinct from a biological act. It has a biological substrate. It couldn't exist otherwise.
Yeah.
So what can we... I want to just go back to this thought in our remaining minutes. I want to really make sure you share with us from your heart what we humans can be expecting to see. You mentioned financial collapse, and I know that in the Purposeful Universe you make reference to a prior book that you did, a comment you made in 1993 about the upcoming collapse really in 2007, and there have been economists who have confirmed what you saw by reading the Mayan calendar of that collapse. It's been verified that in December of 2007 that was the foreshadow, if you will, of what we all came to know in September of 2008. So you mentioned the collapse of the euro. What other signs and symptoms will we see, both on the downside, so to speak, but, that's a very subjective comment, and then, of course, we'll be seeing a beautiful upswing as well?
Well, I think it will be it will be very chaotic to begin with.
Yes.
And to try to summarize will fail, because we will see at the same time, I think, a collapse of the world's economic political system. And whether it is something that sort of opens up at that date and sort of expands the like a wedge that goes into to open the dam, whether that happens very shortly or in some period of time, I do not know. But at the same time, there will be this opening to coming from another place when we are creating a new economic political system, meaning coming from this kind of a unity, coming from the heart space. And how that will look like, I don't know, because it really will not be scripted. I do not believe that reality after this point will be scripted the way it has been. And that may even mean that prophecy will not anymore apply after that particular point in time. And so
Saturday.
It may not apply after that point in time. And instead, everything will be up to whatever people make of it. Now, that has not been the case before. People might have thought so. People might have thought that they've been free to create whatever they liked. But that's not been true. It's just because they've not have studied how these polarities has been imposed on humanity, and how they have more or less forced us to create separations between different classes and different peoples. But at this point, I can imagine that possibly at that point, Saturday, essentially, there is no longer any script, not on the cosmic level. And that would mean that things are unpredictable, and it's all up to the human beings. In a way, it's
free
never
at
been
last,
before.
free at last, as Martin Luther King said. Exactly. You know, you mentioned the people with the larger bank accounts controlling essentially the fate and the lives of the people with the smaller bank accounts, and it's all a bunch of decimals and zeros. It's so most quantitatively ridiculous, but true. So it's like the highest possible reduction of the human spirit. I mean, it's like so insane. And that's about to change. So that also implies that the underlying power structure that has existed for a long, long time on this planet that allowed this ridiculous quantification of the human species in our societies, the cave-like, the prison-like, the slavery in which we've all been living and toiling for so long, thinking we're free, oh boy, is that funny, will actually also come to a conclusion?
Yes. I mean, whether it happens overnight,
I'm having a lot of fun. Yes. Elise, yes, please.
I'd like to comment on that. I think Dr. Calleman is exactly right, and he's using the term opening. And I'd like to use the word opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's a real opportunity for every one of us on this planet to make some choices that are different than what we've done in the past. And I also like to use the term embody the truth. And once we go beyond this polarity structure that has been imposed on us with our left brain, right brain hemisphere. And
I win, you lose.
Right, power
male,
and control.
Female.
Yeah, male, female, dominance, control, power,
black, white. Ho,
exactly. Once we go beyond that, and we're operating in our hearts, in the coherent state with all that exists, we have the opportunity to write a new script. Now, with that opportunity also comes responsibility. And this is why embodiment is so important, because we must choose. And this is why Dr. Calleman is saying we don't know what it's going to look like. Nobody really knows yet. However, there are those of us who believe strongly in this opportunity, and we can feel it empathically. We know that the shift is happening, and I would like to say that it's not even a specific date. I have been feeling and noticing the shift coming for some time, like he said, in the ninth wave, right?
Yes.
And we see people wigging out. We see people doing really wild and crazy things. We see barbaric things going on the planet. We see a lot of darkness on the planet. And yet at the same time, we're seeing this immense capacity for change and opportunity to go into the heart and start lifting up one another. So it'll be really fascinating, particularly on October 28th and beyond, and I would say even to 11/11. I think that's going to be a real wobbly period up until that time. And that's just my personal take on it. But that wobbly period will give us some more light and some more opportunity to make some choices.
Sure.
And I don't know that everybody will make the same choice. What do you think, Ruben?
I think that we're going to be wobbling for a while, by the way. And it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I
Ruben,
think and feel that,
words.
We need to take this opportunity, to better ourselves so that we can help those that are still sleeping. This is my part, really, to encourage those that are still unconscious to really find that within themselves to wake up so that they can make a difference in their lives, to their families, and that can resonate throughout the world. As for us as Hopi, we are a microcosm. So what happens at Hopi happens and resonates to the world. So we need to wake up with my people so that we can be the hope for the world to come back into balance and harmony. So I feel that, and I'm grateful for Calleman's work, his experience to give us the encouragement to wake up. I know some probably will not agree with him, but we need to be respectful of one another. We can respectfully disagree with one another also.
Yes.
and to take this opportunity to make a big difference for the future.
And we can also respectfully agree.
Yes.
So I want to thank you all for being guests on the show today for our Indigenous Prophecy Roundtable.
Thank you,
much
Mitchell.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Calleman.
Sure.
We are all
Thank you, both of
indigenous.
We are all indigenous, absolutely. All came from somewhere.
Yes.
You know, I like to quote Reverend Jesse Jackson, who said, "We all may have come here on different boats, but we're all in the same boat now."
Yes.
That's a great quote.
Dr. Carl Calleman, thanks so much for joining us in Sweden and staying up so late for our show. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being in it. Yes.
Absolutely. God bless you, and we'll talk soon. Thank you all for listening. Please join us at our website, www.abetterworld.net. Come, and there you will be able to also get the websites of the good work that Ruben and Elys are doing, as well as, of course, Dr. Carl Calleman. All the information will be there for you. Well, tune in tomorrow night for A Better World TV, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
This is PRN, Progressive Radio Network, your voice for independent views.